In one of my on-campus classes right now, we're studying Plato's dialogue called the Phaedo, which is it's about Socrates' account of why he's willing to die. Because see, Socrates was previously accused by the court of Athens for a number of charges, but principally for corrupting the youth as well as denying the gods of the city. Well, Socrates is found guilty, and he's sentenced to execution. Well, as this sentencing starts to become clear during the trial in the Apology, Socrates looks down the court of Athens and he tells them that even if you kill me, you cannot do harm to a good man, because he's identifying the value of his life with more than mere self-preservation. He's identifying it with the good. He's identifying it with wisdom. And this is something that cannot be taken away through any external means whatsoever. Socrates' relationship with wisdom, the good, the life that he ought to be living, this can only be severed if he severs it by choosing the path of cowardice. Well, fast forward a little bit, and now he is awaiting his execution. There's a bit of a delay due to, some ritual things going on. That's beside the point. There's some delay. He's able to spend some time with his friends, and they come together, and they tell him that we've pulled our money together, we've made the right connections, like, we can get you out of here. You don't have to die. However, you have to go into exile. But you'll live in exile. And Socrates says, no, I can't do that. Because there are some fates that are worse than death, such as the fate of the coward. It would be cowardly for me to run away. That the true path of wisdom is to stand firm, to accept the sentencing that was given to me, because, who am I without the city of Athens? I would not be the person I am without the city of Athens. I owe myself to the city, and so even if it's acting, against the demands of wisdom in this moment, I still have a civil obligation to fulfill the demands that are placed upon me by the city, and I also have an obligation to maintain fidelity to wisdom, regardless of what those consequences are. And so through fidelity to his civil duty, as well as to his existential duty to wisdom, he decides to stay and says, no, I'm going to go through with death, because that is not the worst thing. And not only is it not the worst thing, not only do we have reason to endure death, but maybe we actually have reason as philosophers to long for death, to look forward to death. Maybe death is actually the best thing that could happen to you. Now, to break that down a little bit, to understand that full argument, well, I recommend that you read the Fedo and or take my upcoming course on Platonism, Stoicism, and Till We Have Faces. And in that course, our Plato text will be the Phaedo. Well, I'm not going to get into this main argument. I just want to give you some context here for what this dialogue is about. But what I want to highlight here is a statement made by one of his conversation partners here that is a really good job of demonstrating the sharp distinctions between pre-modern philosophy and modern or postmodern philosophy in which we now live. And so let me just read this here. It said that, "For surely no wise man thinks that when set at liberty, he can take better care of himself than the gods take care of him. A fool may perhaps think this. He may argue that he had better run away from his master, not considering that his duty is to remain to the end, and not to run away from the good, and that there is no sense in his running away." What's being said here is that we are part of a story, that our life is not our own. Life itself is a gift. And if we're given a gift, that presupposes that there is a giver. There's that which is above us, that which has authority to give life. And if there is authority over the life that we have, well, then we would do well to pay attention to that authority, to listen to that authority, to listen to that wisdom, to look for that which stands above and beyond us and which has authority to designate how we ought to be living our lives. And so for the pre-modern world, whether we're talking about the ancients, whether we're talking about the medievals, there's this prevailing idea that we are born into a particular context, a context of what reality is, a context for what humanity is, a context for how we ought to be living our lives. And the path to real freedom is found not in creating reality out of nothing, because, well, reality's already been created. It doesn't need us to do that again. What we need to do is not to create reality, but to find our place within the story of reality. We need to find out what duties are placed upon us, and the way that you become an authentic human individual is by executing those human duties well. Now, exactly what are those duties? I mean, well, for Plato, that principally comes down to we have a duty to love the good, and out of that, well, all of our other duties they spring out of that central duty to love what is good, that which is chiefly lovable. And then again, the details of that I'll get into in the course, but for now, I really just want to highlight this distinction that what Plato here, through Cebus, this discussion partner with Socrates, what Plato says here is that it is the fool who decides to set off on his own, to divorce himself from transcendent wisdom, and to establish his own path in life, his own wisdom. It's the fool that does that. It's literally the idiot. I don't just mean to be insulting when I say that, but I mean, I don't just mean to be insulting, but when you look at like what the word idiot means, it comes from the Greek idios, which means like your own, something you have of your own. And so imagine that you have a classroom of students, and you're one of the students. You're all working on a math problem. And imagine everybody in the room concludes correctly that 2 plus 2 equals 4. But you insist, no, 2 plus 2 does not equal 4, 2 plus 2 equals 5. Well, in that conclusion, you have a private understanding of things, divorced from not only what everybody else believes, because sometimes a minority opinion can be correct, but most essentially, your understanding of that topic, of that subject, of that problem, is divorced from reality, the reality that binds us together. And so in your private understanding, you are an idiot. Now, jump forward to postmodernism. Jump forward to the likes of Jean-Paul Sartre. Look forward to Camus. Look forward to these philosophers who argue that there is no such thing as human essence. There is no such thing as human nature. All you have is yourself, and you need to stop relying on transcendent wisdom, supposedly transcendent wisdom. You need to stop relying on the way that things should be, and you need to recognize that all of reality is up to you. It all comes down to your radical subjectivity. There is no meaning to reality. There's no part that you are supposed to play. All you can do is just create reality. You determine what is valuable. You determine what's right. You determine what it means to be human through the largely arbitrary decisions that you're making. And so this gets to the fundamentally different orientations of the ancient versus the postmodern world. That you go back to the premodern world, and there's this idea that we are part of a story. Our obligation is to fulfill the duties, to play the role that is appointed to us. And so we find rest in the eternal reason that governs the cosmos. Go to the postmodern world, and there is no reason that governs the cosmos. There's not even anything like right reason that governs you. All there is you deciding things out of nothing. And so the Sartrean, the postmodern radical subjectivist would look back to the premodern and say that someone like Plato is living in bad faith. They're not taking responsibility for their responsibility to define what existence is like, what reality is like, what wisdom is. So he would say that Plato's acting in bad faith. Plato would then look at Sartre and say, you're an idiot, that you are divorcing yourself from the wisdom that you are necessarily related to, but that you are intentionally rejecting, you are intentionally seeking to oppose. And so you are ultimately running away from the good, and there's no sense in running away from the good because goodness is tied to that which holds reality together. And so there's no real specific point I'm trying to illustrate here, other than just helping us to understand these two very different ways of approaching the world. And it's worth noting that as far as a prevailing viewpoint, the postmodern radically subjectivist approach is relatively new, again, as a prevailing viewpoint. You can find these ideas in the ancient world. They just weren't widely accepted because people had a little bit more, well, maybe they had a little bit more authenticity in their understanding of what it means to be human. I'll talk to you next time.